Welcome to Pathways, a career podcast from the Idaho State University Career Center. I'm your host, Mark Beaver. Today, we're talking with Karen Homstad, Associate Director of Campus Recreation for Idaho State University. Karen, like many of us, had quite the circuitous path to her current dream job, but it's really what she learned about herself along the way that makes this conversation so interesting. Please, settle in. Enjoy our conversation with Karen Homstad. Hey Karen, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
All right, that's good to hear. So, Karen, you work at the rec center, so I assume that most of your job is just kind of playing all day, jumping in the pool, doing a quick workout, maybe playing some basketball, hit the climbing wall. Is that right in assuming that that's...
Sportsing 24/7,
Yeah.
40 hours a week of professional sportsing.
Is that what your job entails?
My job feels like it's a little bit of everything. So currently I feel like I'm the chief problem solver at work. So it might be covering lunch, covering the desk, fixing a weight bench. Just kidding, I don't fix the weight bench, but I found a lost screw and I think it goes to that weight bench, so finding the guy that does that. I'm also do a lot of emailing, responding to people, put together various proposals, so there's definitely busy work involved in it. But I have proposed that instead of having a sit-down meeting, that we go and have a shoot-around meeting. Nobody's taken me up on that so far.
Well, you're putting it out there right now, so hopefully someone's listening that'll be into that. But I do think that's important when, so many of us kind of see a job at a place and maybe have certain assumptions about what that job is. Maybe that, like myself, that, it'd be great to work at the rec center because I could play all day, but that's not really what a lot of those jobs entail. So as far as just you kind of gave me a pretty good day-to-day breakdown. What out of this job really gives you some fulfillment? What do you love about this job?
I do like working with the student employees. I like helping them develop skills, grow, be better human beings. I think that I always saw myself becoming a teacher, but at the same time, I couldn't stand the thought of being in one place at the same time. And so in my career, I've been an instructor and a coach and have naturally developed those teaching skills, maybe not in a traditional set, but working with students to help them be better employees, learn how to have a job, learn what's normal in a work environment.
Yeah, I noticed that I didn't really hear you mention that kind of managerial aspect, but I do know just from knowing you that you do kind of manage a lot of student employees there, some of the most on campus, I think. Yeah,
there's about 100. Well, I think 100 would probably be the record, so I like to stick with that. The most ever has been 100, and that's between all of our programs. So up at Campus Rec, we have aquatics. Well, we usually have aquatics. We have intramurals. We have the front desk. We have a facilities crew. And then we have some student supervisors in there, I think. Climbing wall. We have our climbing wall crew as well. And so between all those positions, we've hired, we currently have, I think, 70 employees on staff. And
wow.
About 50 of them are direct line, underneath me.
Mm-hmm.
I still get calls. I think the last 2 mornings in a row, I've gotten a call at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning about scheduling stuff. So we didn't show up, somebody was late, how do I open the safe? And there are day-to-day kind of grind stuff like that are not my favorite. But what are you going to do? That's
right. It's part of the job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think in any job that there's going to be certain aspects that aren't your favorite part of it, but those often, if you can kind of weigh those and the parts that you really enjoy outweigh those, then it's pretty easy to kind of learn how to just incorporate the other stuff into the...
Yeah, and I also like to model behavior, so I'm not complaining about it. I think that if that's your job, to help people do their job, then that's where you're at.
Yeah. So as far as outside of the job in your personal life, is there anything about this job that kind of helps you live the life you want outside of work?
Yeah, I think that I have great coworkers and a great boss, and it gives us flexibility to do the job as it needs to be done and when it needs to be done. And I've always been the type of person, I still hate to set an alarm. It's the worst feeling in the entire world. So being really, I know for myself, being really structured in, like, you need to be here in a seat at 7:55 in the morning, and then you will leave work for an hour so that you can come back later and work for an extra hour, and then you will not leave until 5:01. That has never, or, whatever the shift work has been, that has never been something that's been good for me. And so I've always migrated into the jobs that have that flexibility to do the work.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on your own terms, but just have some flexibility to take a long lunch, not take a lunch, be a little bit late, stay a little late, work a weekend, whatever it is. I personally really enjoy that. And I don't know, I actually wonder if that's a human thing where, like, oh, everybody likes that, or if there are actually people that love, like, a regimented schedule.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's definitely a spectrum. I think that a lot of people probably find a lot of security in that regimented schedule. I do.
You do?
Yeah. I am much like you, and I found it interesting, something you had mentioned previously that we'll come back to, because I had a similar experience that teaching in a traditional sense was that was a route I originally went down, and pretty quickly realized that, as you alluded to, the kind of like the structure of the day wasn't appealing to me. Something I enjoy about my job is exactly what you were just saying, is that ability to have a little bit of flexibility, maybe to kind of chase some projects that you're interested in, but also knowing that, if there's a family emergency, you don't have to call a sub or something, like you can go take care of something for a couple hours if the kid is sick. But I guess that's kind of going back. You said that you were interested in teaching. I'm wondering how far that might go back. But a question I often ask is, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I never really wanted to be anything, which sounds kind of weird, and in fact, with my own kids, I've read that you're not supposed to ask them what they want to be, because then it, like, locks them in or whatever.
It's a lot of pressure.
I've not done a great job at that, but I think we're developing an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor currently. That's where we're at. But for myself, I never really wanted to be anything specifically. My path looked more like, I really like to swim, and I'm a very competitive person and is good at swimming. And so from about age 10, 11, I was very much into this sport. And I was lucky enough to be my family supported that. They were able to help me grow and train and get where I needed to go with my sport. When I graduated from high school, I remember this at graduation, I had said that I wanted to be, maybe be a teacher, right? Like, I don't know, because that's what people ask you, what are you going to do? You're going to go to college, what are you going to be? And I was like, I might be a teacher. Like, it was always my backup plan, but I never felt like, I'm going to be a teacher. This is the thing for me. So, and I know you're going to get into it a little bit later, but that has been my path really has developed in the fact that I wish my parents had gotten to me like nuclear engineering when I was 2 years old, right? Maybe like a bazillionaire living in Taos or something. But they got me into swimming, and I really, really, really liked it. And it's certainly that sports background, and I did some other sports too. That sports background has played into me working in campus recreation. And I do remember, it was probably a decade ago, I remember looking at Reed Gym and telling my husband, that is my dream job, running Reed Gym.
Oh. That
is my dream job. I had met Doug Milder, the director who had been there maybe a year before that, and I was like, this is a cool job. And it does not do well for my ego for me to be in my dream job, like no problem. I'm just in my dream job. But technically, according to myself 10 years ago, I'm in my dream job. I don't know that I'm in my dream job now. I do a little exercise icebreaker where I'll ask because I coach too, I'll ask student employees or I'll ask athletes, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Which is a hilarious question to ask somebody who's 20.
Right, yeah.
But it's a good one to ask other people. And I personally think a really interesting thing to do would be like a set designer. Like you look at a movie and maybe it's set in 1982 and somebody has paid big bucks to set that movie up to look like it was set in 1982.
Yeah.
It'd be an interesting job.
Yeah, that seems like a
So
fun...
long story short, I've never really wanted to be anything, but I am in my dream job.
Right.
Maybe.
Cool. Well, I mean, one thing, I think that it's super refreshing for people to actually hear that, because when I kind of incorporated this question into this show, I kind of expected most people that I talked to have like, well, you know, I wanted to be a scientist and now I'm a geophysicist, right? Like a little bit more like of a straight shot, where like at least have kind of a bigger dream. I mean, you know, from a young age. But one of the reasons I was interested in it is because I didn't really have anything either.
And people would ask you and it'd be like, right, firefighter.
Yeah, I mean, it would change. It would be kind of whatever I saw at the time that was interesting me. If it was a comedian on TV, I'd say a comedian. If it was, you know, a rock star on an album, I'd say rock. There's whatever I thought was interesting at the time. I mean, there is something else you said that, you know, why didn't your parents get you into nuclear engineering? You could do this. But I mean, yeah, there are these alternate pathways that maybe they'd be fine, maybe they'd be different. But I mean, have you ever looked into what it takes to be a nuclear engineer? I mean, that might... Oh, no,
I'm not interested in being a nuclear engineer.
Right.
I just know my mind is really like, I will do this, right? And like wholeheartedly. So if I'm going to do... we have a button making machine at work. And so if I'm going to make a button that says, hey, thanks for the show, Mark Beaver, I'm not just going to make like one button for you. I'm going to have like 27 versions, like 100 of them, and wrap them up in a cute little gift bag and make sure they're at the Career Center. Like, it's pretty like whole hog when I go into things. And so for me, I was really 100% into making sure that I could swim as fast as I could swim.
I see.
And then I did that.
So it wasn't necessarily about why didn't my parents get me into this other thing. It was more that since you are such a focused go-getter, once you get into something, there's part of you that wonders.
Focused go-getter is a nice way to say it.
Sure.
Fairly obsessed.
Right. But yeah, what if I would have gotten this other thing, like what may have been. But that thing happened to be swimming, and you followed that, and that was kind of what was propelling you. So you went back to this teaching thing, but where did that come from? Where did the inclination to have that as a fallback come from?
I don't know. You know, maybe there's like a feminist rant in here that was the thing that I thought that I would do. I'm a big reader, or I was, before cell phones were invented. So, and I really liked English, and so I thought that I would be maybe an English teacher.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I thought I might do.
Right.
And I did. I got a degree in creative writing, actually. And I also have a master's in athletic administration from Idaho State University. But I think what happens to people, and I can see it now, although I don't think you ever could have convinced me at the time, that your life, I think especially when you're 12, 15, 18, 22, it's on this trajectory, right? You go to elementary school and then you move on, and you go to middle school and then you move on, and then you go to high school and you move on, and then you go to college and then you get a job, right? And I don't think life works like that, but yet the way that we grow up as young adults, it is all this really focused, like A, B, C, D, E, F. And I think that if I had to go back in time and be myself, but with the knowledge that I know, or if I could like be my own parent or something, you know, something Black Mirror-ish like that, I could tell myself like, this is not a straight line. Yeah. This is not a straight line. I don't know that I would have listened to myself, but when I see, so I like to lurk on Reddit, and I follow the career subreddit, career advice or something like that. And it's always like, what should I do once I graduate college? What career should I choose? And I don't think like a career chooses you or maybe, but most of the jobs that I've had have just kind of been at the right place at the right time. And who knows how many opportunities I missed because I wasn't in the right place at the right time. But it definitely was not a straight line. And certainly after college, it was a shocking experience for me. I did great in school. I was valedictorian. I graduated high honors from college. And then once I graduated, I was like, okay, here I am. I'm ready for like stage Q or whatever it was in my life. And I had great grades, great student, great everything, right? Swimming is done, just out of years to compete, not so good that you could go on, but now it's time to get that JOB. I didn't get the teaching certificate or else I probably would have went right into it. I guess I knew subconsciously it wasn't going to work out. So I moved to Seattle. I was like, I'm going to go to Seattle. I had some friends in a similar situation where they graduated, they didn't really know what they wanted to do, and they went and did temp work. And I'm like, well, I'll be a temp, right? So I go to the temp agency with my resume, and my resume is like swimming, swim team, swim instructor, swim coach, lifeguard, academic All-American, like all this stuff on it that I had done and poured my entire heart and soul, like all this like decade of life, or you could argue my entire life had worked up to this point, to the pinnacle of everything I wanted. And the person who was doing just like a sit-down interview with me said, yeah, I was in band in high school and you don't see that all over my resume. And wow. I kid you not, I could start sobbing just thinking like how devastated I was by that experience. So that was kind of my first like failure in my life, really, of something like I thought, well, here we go, I'm on to this next stage. But I wasn't onto that next stage, and nothing I had done had really prepared me for my life to deviate from this straight line. So I left, and I sobbed, and I sobbed, and I sobbed, and I remember being in downtown Seattle. Went and got a job at Starbucks. What else are you going to do in Seattle? Yeah. Quickly ran out of money. Moved back to Reno, got a job as a waitress, had too much fun as a waitress, had to move back home to Pocatello, moved in with my parents. I guess I'm probably 23 at this point. But when I moved back home, I was like, that's it, service industry. I'm not doing service industry anymore. I have a college degree. I'm a winner, like, you know what I mean? So I went and did an AmeriCorps stint up at the women's prison. And that really solidified that I was not meant to be a teacher, in a traditional standpoint. Oh, okay. So I did GED education, taught some yoga up there, but I was still living with my parents, and I wasn't cutting it. I didn't want to live with my parents, so I went and got a job as a cocktail waitress. And it just the way that I am, I really enjoyed it. I was really fast. It was pretty physical. And then I worked as a bartender, managed the First National, if anybody's familiar with that one. Sure. And I had always said, like, okay, I will work at the bar until I'm 30, because I felt at the time, and so I do not mean this in an offensive way, because it probably sounds more offensive coming from me now in my mid-40s. Anybody behind the bar, females, like, after age 30, like, looked a little, like, you know what I mean? They just, I don't know. Isn't there something else for you in your life? Like a young person's sport. Men get an extra decade. But anyway, just an aside there. So I had decided, like, at age 30, I was going to be done working at the bar. Met my husband, got married, went and worked for my sister doing headhunting. So she works in biotech recruiting. And that was good. I can cold call anybody. Yeah. So I learned from my bartending job how to have 10-second conversations, and I learned from my recruiting job I can cold call anybody. It was downturn 2008, lost my gig there. It was not a good time to be working in employment. Yeah. Was unemployed. Best 9 months of my life. I call it my first retirement. It was amazing. And then this job came up in Lava Hot Springs, and I had a friend, again, right place, right time, was like, hey, there's a pool job open. You're a pool person, right? And at this point, it had probably been 8 years since I really had done anything like in aquatics. And I'm like, well, yeah. So I applied for the job, I guess. Unemployment, they make you apply for jobs. Go to the interview, assuming there's no way I could have this job. I mean, I could totally do the job, but I just never done it before. And lo and behold, I got the job.
No?
Yeah. So that kind of set me on my trajectory to where I am now. So that's my story kind of up until I became a professional, right? I didn't become a professional until I was about 30, 31.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Karen Homstad. She's the Associate Director of Campus Recreation at Idaho State University. So Karen, is that from that job at Lava, is that where did you already have a master's at that point, or was that about the time?
I started going back to school when I got laid off from the recruiting gig. I was like, well, I'm laid off. That's what we go back to school for. So I started pursuing that master's degree. I'd always seen myself as somebody getting a master's, and so I started going back to school.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's so many statistics about how college enrollment increases at these times of recession in America. That's I digress.
Well, I'm like PhD never.
Yeah.
Master's for sure.
Sure. So it's interesting along that way. You had so many different types of jobs, but it sounds like from every job you had, you learned a little something about yourself. Just like another little puzzle piece about a strength, or even some things that you didn't like. Some futures that you didn't want to see, quite possibly. How did you kind of take those in and use them to move forward and kind of like build, like you're saying, to get to your dream job? How did those come in to play? Current dream job. Sorry, we still have the set designer. But for your current dream job, did those come into factor and kind of helping you decide what direction to go, how it's going to help you get to that point?
That's an interesting question. I think it's like therapy, right? It's only a couple years later that you're like, aha, that was really helpful. But I would definitely agree. I had a job at a non-Starbucks coffee shop when I went back to Reno, and there were like handwritten notes everywhere. Anybody that's worked in fast food or any place, those handwritten notes that everybody has. So I went like on my own because it bothered me so much, all these kind of stained, taped up, half-torn notes with too many apostrophes in them. I went and typed them all up, printed them out, appropriate sizes, laminated them, sliced them all up, and then went and taped them all over the place, right? My boss lost her mind. She was so upset about it.
Oh.
Yeah. And now looking back, my personality doesn't necessarily jive with everybody because of my overconfidence and my problem solving. But at the same time, what are your strengths? I'm a real problem solver, and I'm very confident. So I definitely, like I said, learned to cold call, and I still know people that are like, I don't know, I'll just send a text, or maybe,
Oh, yeah.
I don't have any problem picking up a phone or talking to anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's likewise just a total spectrum. I can talk to a lot of people one-on-one, but the idea of cold calling someone, I can feel like anxiety creeping up the back of my neck to try to call somebody and tell them these things. We talk about this a lot too. Like, are you the type of person who asks someone a question via email, or do you just pick up the phone and get it done?
Right.
And that's.
Well, I think you learn too about the jobs that you don't like,
the
type of managers you don't like, the type of situations you don't want to be in. I mean, no bad jobs. I would encourage anybody who's not happy in their job that can afford, literally and whatever that means, and figuratively, to not have that job anymore, and find something that is going to work for them. And from that, you can learn, like, I don't want to be front-facing customer service. I had an employee, and he had been working for us, and then had an opportunity to go, work for like a medical clinic at the front. It sounded awesome to him. And then after a couple of months, he was like, hey, can I have a job back here? He just did not like talking to people, even if it was paying good money and in his, what he thought he wanted to be. So I think you do learn from every job. What I have encouraged our students, and this is from working at ISU and thinking about employment as part of your educational experience, which I'm sure is 100% like your jam, right? That as you go, have a resume, have notes, whatever it is, have this master document in Google Docs or your preferred shared platform.
Sure.
Is there another one? And then as you run into these experiences, such as, wow, I really enjoyed typing up all these things and then laminating them and then sticking to the walls and replacing all these ratty notes to other employees. I mean, like, kind of like note that to yourself, and maybe you have a difficult interaction with a patron or your boss or whatever it is. Note that in this master Google Doc, and then that way, when you're preparing for interviews, and they're going to say, like, name a time you had to deal with a difficult patron, and how did that turn out, or what kind of boss do you like? Whatever they're going to ask, you can kind of refer back to those, and then those can be in your mind at the time. Otherwise, you're going to get asked that question, and I have 1,000 bad customers that I've interacted with and handled well, but I can't think of a single one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, and we have talked about quite a bit, what we refer to often as transferable skills. What used to be called soft skills, but for some reason,
they're called transferable now?
Yeah, they're called transferable.
Oh gosh, that's my new buzzword. Right along with growth mindset.
Yes, it is. It is in the same vein. But yeah, these skills that aren't necessarily, the hard skills that you did in a job, right? Like
how to turn a computer on?
Right, like those kind of day-to-day, like using Microsoft Suite, right, or a specific type of scientific equipment.
Yeah, I was going to say us liberal arts majors. Let's just imagine what all those specific...
Sure. But yeah, it's something that we call transferable skill, and they're actually what employers are going to ask for the most. If you look at a job description, they're all things about communication, professionalism, teamwork, these kind of ideas, and finding out how you work with those different skills is invaluable. To find out what type of leader you are. Are you a type that models behavior, or are you the type that is more of like a designated leader that is good at being kind of at the top and giving people roles and kind of coaching the team, or being on a team, the same thing. Like, are you going to be kind of the point guard, or are you someone who's going to be a role player? And that's a real strength to the team. So learning these things about yourself is completely invaluable, because it doesn't really matter if you're the type of person who picks up the phone to ask someone a question or types an email. It's about learning what is your strength or what is your natural kind of tendency, and expanding on that. And yeah, and this is something that we too try to really tell students and job seekers to really reflect on. And it's awesome. This conversation has been basically about you reflecting on kind of pulling a lot of these from your experience, to actually reflect on those kind of transferable skills. Because when you have a resume that, says you worked at so-and-so place and this is what you did. I made 100 sandwiches a day and used the cash register and counted money. That's great. But like you said, how many upset customers did you deal with, and how did you successfully diffuse those situations and things like that? And kind of learning that about yourself is really huge.
And I think also knowing that if it's a bad fit, it doesn't mean it's you.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh no,
somebody goes to a job and you think like, I just imagine myself in this position in my early 20s thinking like, wow, there must be something really wrong with me that I can't X, Y, Z. And it really wasn't me. It was kind of the situation that I was in, or the person that I was working for.
And that's also extremely important, to find out what's not for you. And it goes back a little bit to your talking about that career pathway isn't necessarily a straight line. It's much more convoluted than that for most people. And a lot of them, for myself, looks more like a tree with the kind of dead ends of jobs that I've found just weren't really for me. And I'd go back out, go and make another branch. And so taking that idea back to, as you're saying, you're talking to new students coming to ISU, it's kind of a, expecting students to be moving at 17, 18 to be choosing careers or thinking about careers. I guess, do you just have any advice, like one piece of advice for those students as they kind of start this journey into figuring out what they want to do, what they want to major in, what they want to become?
Do I have a piece of advice for incoming students as they go on to the next stage, right? Go to school and then and then have a job, right, for the rest of their lives. Try to sit in on an interview so you're on the other side of the table. That'd be my... I think people get nervous in an interview situation. I know that's a really specific thing, but we really encourage our student managers, supervisors, just to sit in so they can be on the other side of it. And I think to see an interview, that first date, from another side, you can just see, like, you're a person, I'm a person, we're just talking about this job. I think that could be really helpful. So if you get a chance during college to get yourself interview prepped by sitting on the other side of the table, it'll help you understand kind of what it's like from an interviewer standpoint, and then you'll probably be more comfortable during the interviews that you go to know that you're just like talking to a person. And so if the interviewer is having a conversation with you about the job, and that's like feels pretty good, versus somebody who's trying to grill you with questions like, if you were an animal in a safari park, what would you be? Like, that's a weird question. Anyway, I think that's probably one of the most helpful things you can do before you go out there to become your like career person.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming and talking to us today, Karen.
Apparently I could talk forever about it, so
I appreciate
see you at the gym.
See ya. And that was our conversation with Karen. I found it so insightful to hear about all these small things that you can learn about yourself, regardless of the job. No matter how temporary or how small it feels to you at the time, there's something you can take away to build who you're going to become as a professional. If you're interested in learning about your career pathway, please feel free to visit the Idaho State University Career Center website at isu.edu/career. And also check out the other episodes of Pathways available at kisu.org/pathways, available anytime or the first Wednesday of each month at 7:30 on KISU. For the Idaho State Career Center and Pathways, I'm Mark Beaver, wishing you a fantastic rest of your day.